Uh, different type of video today because it's just this has been invading my mind so much that I just have nothing else to do but just rant about it. But like, anyway, the Miss Peregrine series is the greatest series of books I have ever read and probably ever will read. I'm already on book. I'm partially done with book 6 already. The Miss Peregrine movie, however, sucks. Holy fuck, does it suck? I'm gonna get into spoilers later, but for now, I'll just rant about the general stuff. For now, I'll just rant about general stuff. So, uh, first thing I'm going to talk about is the plot of the book, then the plot of the movie. So, the Miss Peregrine books are about Jacob, who, his grand. By the way, you should probably read the books before watching this review, uh, or rant rather. Um, but the Miss Peregrine books are about Jacob Portman and his grandfather, who would always tell him stories about being at being in a children's home with children who had like special powers and stuff. And for like most of his life, he thought that those stories were fake until one night his grandfather dies to mysterious circumstances, and and before he like dies, uh, he tells them a bunch of cryptic stuff before before heading off to Carnholm, which through a series of clues he finds out is the place his grandpa wanted him to go. And so he goes there, and for like the first half of the book, it's debating whether or not his his grandfather was telling the truth or not. Uh, but it's not really a spoiler to say that uh he eventually does find the children and Miss Peregrine herself. This is a really quick rundown, so I'm not going to get into things. Just read the books, basically, if you want a better explanation. But yeah, basically, uh, he finds the children. Then he accidentally leads their enemy, one of their enemies, the Whites, to that loop. I'll get into Whites and Hologas later. But basically, the first book ends on a cliffhanger. Like, excuse me. I'll get more into that in the spoiler section. But basically, all you basically need to know about the story is that the first book ends on a cliffhanger. The movie, it's really similar, but the movie ends there. It ends with one movie. One movie and 6 books should already tell you how bad of an adaptation this movie is. Ugh. But I'm gonna torture myself and go farther into detail. Uh, excuse me. I tried to watch the movie before this review, but I just couldn't. So this is gonna be a like really short thing, but I'll start out with minor differences. In the beginning of the book, it introduces Jacob as a rich kid who's just alone. But like he isn't just like no friends or anything. He has one other friend, and it's almost like he's basically forced to be friends with him because they do not. It's so it's such a minor friendship that even in the books they don't. In the books they don't even dwell on it that much. But yeah, but the movie doesn't have that, and the movie is just a complete loner. And I think that kind of takes away from the character of Jacob, because like it's like it makes him feel like a sort of more aloneness than just having no friends at all. He only has one other friend that he's barely friends with, and it just that's just to me at least that's more alone than being totally alone. Having one friend that is basically just forced to be with you because there's no one else. Uh, in and I don't think there's a lot I can. There's a lot of minor different. It's just okay. I'm just gonna skip to the main cast because it's the main thing that's clawing at my mind. So I will talk about at least three characters that were extremely faithful to their not extremely. I wouldn't say extremely faithful. They're just now two characters. In fact, two characters. Just two characters that were sort of faithful to their uh. That were sort of faithful to the books. First, we'll start with Millard. You know, he's a invisible boy. So yeah, and he's really smart. He keeps records of things, which I don't think they really dwell that much into in the movie. Like in the books, uh, when they're in the Millard helps. For those of you who haven't read the books and are confused, basically, the children are in a time loop that loops the same day over and over again, and it's in the middle of World War II. Uh, Millard keeps a log of all the things that happen. And so to escape entire like mob from chasing them down and killing them, he waits for a precise time where airplanes start flying overhead and all that stuff. So everyone's distracted by them, then they can escape. That really shows you what kind of person Millard is. He's a smart and cunning person, while at the same time he's sneaky and thief, basically. I don't really think they do anything with that in the books. Not in the books, in the movies, though. Then there's Horace, who I don't really know what to say with Horace's character. They dumb him down a lot, basically. I think he's like there for one scene. One scene he's really important. Then he's not he's not important to any rest of the movie whatsoever, which is very very different from the books. In the books, he is essentially one of the he's the reason most of the protagonists are alive, basically. Both the protagonists and their hope as well. I'll dwell more into that. Uh, and that's all I can really say about characters who are mostly faithful to their book counterparts. Now we're going into semi-faithful. Uh, we got Hugh, and for some reason, it may just be because they don't show her a lot in the movie, and I just forget about her. She probably was in the movie, but I just don't remember her at all. Fiona, she's a girl who can manipulate plants and such. They barely do anything with her, and also Hugh, who has basically a bunch of bees living in his stomach. In the book, the two are a couple, which is an entire thing throughout like every single book. At well, not it's an entire thing. It's really important in the uh second trio of books, especially. But in the movie, they barely do anything. They're barely there. Okay, now that we got the two sort of faithful ones out of the way, let's get the ones that are more not as faithful to their characters. I'll start out simple with the twins. The twins are in the book for 1 page. And they're not even like present or talking to the characters or anything. No, it's just a photograph. It's just a photograph of them. And for some reason, the people who made the movie decided to put them in as a character. Sure, fine. The more peculiarities, the better, right? So, yeah, I can't really say a lot about them other than they're just not in the book at all, besides 1 page. Now, I'm trying to save the ones I'm just dying to talk about last. Let's get to Enoch. Enoch in the book, he's a witty, pessimistic, or I'd say slightly pessimistic, kind of like a jerk, but not like a jerk to where he's just not like a jerk to where he's just a complete downer. He's just like a guy who says a lot of negative things, but despite that, he's still pretty positive and he still supports his friends and whatnot. But in the movie, he's like a dickhead, basically. He's just a dickhead. Nothing really irredeemable about him. And for some reason, he has a relationship with one of the characters, which, as far as I know, is not true. I know for a fact it's not in the first book, at least. Yeah, and the one thing that sucked is that for some reason he's like 17. Yeah, he looks like he's he's 18 or 19, even though he's like around Jacob's age, which is like 16. Also, for some reason they called Jacob Jake in the movie. I have no idea why. Okay. Now we're treading into real inaccurate territory. So, Bronwyn. In the book, Bronwyn is like, if I remember correctly, the oldest of them, even though they're all well into their 90s or 80s. But like, physically oldest, not mentally or actually oldest. So she's kind of like a motherly or supporting figure for the group. She's really polite. And she cares for the little ones, Olive and Claire. I think Claire, that's another one. I totally forgot about Claire. I'm not sure Claire's in the movie. I think she's in the movie, but I cannot tell. Claire has a mouth on the back of her head. And she doesn't really do anything in the books either besides whine. So, I guess that's probably the most accurate character. But yeah, she basically cares for the little ones like Olive and Claire in the books. We'll get to Olive in the movie in a second. But in the movie, Bronwyn is the youngest of them all. Which doesn't make sense. Because she's supposed to be the motherly figure to everyone. And, oh my god, I'm starting to get pissed just thinking about it. It's clear why they did this too. They did it just to make the joke of a child being super strong. I don't know why. That joke's not funny. A child being super strong is not funny. It's just stupid. They ruined a lot of great moments that could have been made into film by deciding to make this character a child just for the joke being their child, but they have a lot of strength and nothing else. It's only going to hit harsher from there. It's probably the. It's probably. It's going to be the most polite I'm going to be following this character analysis. Say hi, Luna. So now we'll get to Olive. In the books, Olive is a young girl. And she has the ability where she floats, but she can't control it, so she has to wear lead boots to keep her down, so she can walk around normally. In the movie, Olive is extremely tall, redheaded. In the book, she's blonde. And her peculiarity is that her hands are extremely hot. This is similar to an ability in the book, but it's not Olive's. It's not Olive's at all. You know whose ability it is? Emma. Emma has Olive's ability. In the book, Emma has the ability to make her hands super hot, but it's not something like it's hot. They're hot all the time, so she's got to wear gloves to stop herself from burning things. No, she can just turn it off and on whenever she wants, you know. And she can make things hot, and she can make herself hotter by like rubbing her hands together. But no, they decide to give Emma the floating ability. Why? Why give her the floating ability? It makes no sense. And she character-wise too, she's different. She's Emma in the first book at least. She's like she changes a lot. She changes a lot during the she changes a lot throughout the series. But in the first book, she's extremely like she's a fighter, but she has a soft spot for her friends and such. But in the movie, she's just generic. She's generic love interest. That's basically what all she is. Also, for some reason, they decided to give her the ability where her ability is also she can blow air out of her mouth. Yeah, that's not in the book. Olive never had that ability. Emma definitely didn't have that ability either. And, it's just stupid. Like, I want someone to explain to me what the point is in mixing these three characters up by age, name, and power. Like, why? Why would you do that? Why? It doesn't make any sense at all. Just give them their proper names and powers. What is wrong with Tim Burton? Why did why? It makes no sense at all. Miss Peregrine is alright. That's all I'm gonna say about her. She's alright. Now we'll get to Jacob. In the books, Jacob's ability is to see and sense hollows. Hollows are hologhast are basically monsters that no one else can see. Besides people like Jacob and his grandfather. But he can sense them by pain in his stomach that acts as like a compass needle, pointing him in the direction and of where the hollow is and whatnot. But it's not just that. It also is bigger, and it gives him an important role in the books, especially the third book. That is his most important role overall, as far as I've read. Because I haven't finished the sixth book yet. So he might have something to. He might be important in the end of that too, but I'm not sure. but he's still pretty important in the final book. He's important in the entire book series. Anyway, back on track. But in the movie, his only ability is to see hollows. That's his one and only ability, is to see them. Not even sense them, I'm pretty sure. He can just see them. There's nothing else with that. Like, why? Why would you just dumb down his ability like that? And like, if you think something like, well, maybe they made the movie before the books. First of all, the first 3 books came out before this movie, and second of all, or at the very least, the first 3 books came out during the same year as this movie, and second of all, the first movie ends on a cliffhanger. That's already enough proof, just to tell you that they did not read the book at all. It's like they had Ransom Riggs himself just explain it to them, but every time he tried to go into any important detail, they just cut him off and tell him, hey, go simpler. And then before he was even finished with explaining the first book, they're like, all right, we got our story right. Which is probably why in the ending to this series, the ending to this movie is so much different to the ending in literally any Miss Peregrine book you'll ever read. And not just in the fact that it's a cliffhanger, in the fact of just whatever it, and just the fact of what the ending is. So, to give you backstory, the Whites were peculiars who were tired of the Yimbrins. That's basically a government who controls the peculiar world. It's basically a government people who are a government in the peculiar world. They're all women whose last names are birds, and they can transform into birds. But they were tired of them basically governing them. And so they try to make an experiment to become immortal or to become like gods, because they thought that the peculiars were more powerful than humans, so they should be the gods among humans. You know, it's it's basically a plot point to the movie of how they're like plot point to the book about how they're like Nazis. And okay, I guess we can just call this the spoiler section too. I just realized we can call this the spoiler section. So the Whites try to do an experiment to make themselves become gods, but it failed, and that turned them into hologas. But once the hologas ate enough peculiars, they transformed into Whites, which are basically what they were before, but they don't have any whites but they don't have any pupils. Their eyes are just white, which is probably why they're called Whites. And they don't have any of their peculiar powers. No. So, but what makes them intimidating is that there's such a large number of them. There's at least 3, I'm being conservative, at least 3 armies worth of Whites. Like, even whenever they think they round up every single White, there's still some lurking around the corner. And in the movie, there's like this room's worth of Whites. And I don't mean like until that enough room. I don't mean like enough Whites until the room is filled and no more can fit. I mean, realistically, if there were some Whites in this room, like 7 would be in here probably. Like, that's not intimidating. That is not intimidating. The entire reason that that the peculiars are hiding in loops and uh the entire plot and the entire fear against the whites is that there's so many of them that they could be anywhere and anyone, and you wouldn't even realize it, because even with their whites in their eye, with their eyes being white, they can wear contact lenses to make them look normal, so they can sneak up on peculiars and then kill them. Also, Hologas can't enter. This is another thing in the book. Hologas can't enter loops until the whites experimented on the Hologas to make them to be able to. In the movie, they can just enter loops, which is stupid. And anyway, back to what I was saying. Yeah, there's like a handful of whites and Hologas together. That's not intimidating at all. None of that is intimidating. And also in the movie, the whites have peculiarities, but that's like the least. That's the least thing I'm concerned about. Okay, so again, spoiler section. So, in the ending of the first book, it's thought that the whites' plan are to redo the experiment that happened that turned them into whites, to do it properly this time. And the reason the peculiars want to stop that, besides them becoming gods potentially, and is because the last time it happened, it made like a big explosion, like a big explosion that like flattened everything within a certain mile radius. But it turns out that was just either a red herring or what the leader of the whites told them to I guess motivate them. So that's not even their plan. Now, the reason why is, so the leader of the whites is Miss Peregrine's brother, Call. Call is intimidating. He is intimidating. And his whole plan was to capture Jacob so that he could lead him to this place known as the Library of Souls. Basic rundown, bunch of powers there. So he leads Jacob to the Library of Souls, has him give him the most powerful ability there, but Call him as Peregrine's brother, Bentham, also using this thing called ambrosia, which is basically a drug for peculiars that either strengthens their peculiarity to the limit, or in Bentham's case, gives them a new peculiarity because he had some of Jacob's grandpa's soul put in there, because that's what it's made of, peculiar soul. It allows them to use other abilities. So Bentham used his grandpa's a bit of his grandpa's soul, then used it to find a similar ability to help distract Call, and so the peculiars could collapse the loop that they were in, so that Call will be trapped forever. This is the ending of book 3, by the way. But the first book, anyway, just ends on that cliffhanger. The Miss Peregrine... let me get back on topic. Sorry, I've just been rambling about the third book. But, the first book, it turns out that Jacob's therapist is white, and he sent him there to find Miss Peregrine's loop so he could take her and the funny difference here is that in the movie, since they have their peculiarities, Dr. Golan is what they just call him in the book. Dr. Golan still has his peculiarity. So in the movie, he has like this knife hand, this shape-shifting hand thing that he can use. In the book, he just brings a gun. He just brings a gun and he just threatens everyone to give him Miss Peregrine and force him in the so he can kidnap her. And like, and then basically in the end, the ending is that after they kill Dr. Golan, yes, they kill him. Uh, since Miss Peregrine wasn't there to reset the loop, the house is destroyed, and all they got to do now is try to get Miss Peregrine. Well, they have Miss Peregrine back, but her wing is broken, so they gotta take her to another Yimbrin to heal her. Her. Uh. So their journey is going on boat across the ocean to find a loop with the Yimbrin in it. That's how the first book ends. They're sailing off to find a Yimbrin. The movie ends. How the movie ends is that the white. You know how I said that there was a red herring that they were going to redo the experiment that caused the whites to become Hologassed. In the book, it was collapsing a loop. Or that's what they got tricked into. That's what they thought it was going to make them gods, but it was actually collapsing the loop, which turned them into Hologassed. But in the movie, it's like this weird contraption thing where they put this helmet over their heads and stuff. Anyway, just not as destructive as loop collapsing, basically. It only harmed them. But in the movie, that is the plan. It's not a red herring, it is the plan. Why? Why? It's literally in the book that... First of all, it's in the book that that Dr. Golan dies, and that's not the entire thing. They don't even stop even if that was the original plan in the first book, they don't even get to stop the thing yet, because they keep Miss Peregrine, and they go on the adventure to find her thing. Yeah, even if that was the original plan, it does not work in the context of the books. In the movies, they just try to redo their experiment, then they fail. Like, what? Why? You have so much potential to become one of the greatest franchise of movies ever. To have such world building. To bring Ransom Riggs' creations to life. And they turned it into a fucking solo film that ends with the happy ending being, I Jacob wanna stay with the peculiar children, which in the books, in the third book, when he's forced to make the decision between staying with the peculiar children or staying with home, even though he enjoys life with the peculiar children and his love life with Emma, he decides to go back home because he said he's still a kid. He's still a teenager. He's saying that once he turns 18, then he'd probably probably try to join life back with them. And sorry, all this rage is making my brain blank out. And once he gets home, all the stuff he tries to... His parents think that he's insane, so they try to lock him up. When I'll admittedly kind of... Deus Ex Machina happens, where... in Cinnamon Sins turns Deus Ex Machina, where it turns out that after they collapse the loop of Library of Souls, it reset everyone's internal clock, which means that since they're in a time loop, if they exited the time loop, they would age forward. Yeah, but loop collapsing, reset that clock so they could be out freely. So the third book ended with a sort of, I like to imagine a think of your own thing until the fourth book came along. But like, you could imagine, Jacob living the rest of his life happy with Emma, or like Ransom Riggs did, it not ending there at all. I can either be talking about the story in general or Emma and Jacob's relationship, but that's another thing. But no, the movie ends with a stupid cliche ending of I'ma stay with these people and live happily ever after with no consequences to my actions whatsoever, because sequels? What are those? Who's he? Why? 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 Why would they do this? There is no fucking excuse as to why this happened. This was directed by Tim Burton. I don't know stuff about movies, but if it's directed by Tim Burton, you should have some control at least. You should have some control over it. Why didn't Ransom Riggs do anything? Was he fucking brainwashed into liking it? I have no idea. How much did they pay him to make it think it's a good movie? How much did they pay him to not just slap Tim Burton or writers, whoever fucking wrote it? Oh, I hate it. I hate it. I hate this movie. It sucks. Don't watch it. Don't watch it to replace the experience of don't watch it to replace the experience of reading the books. It will not work. It will not work. Do not watch the movie to replace the experience of reading the books. If you want to watch the movie, if you thought the movie was good, okay, that's you. That's you. I thought the movie was shit. But whatever. So, oh my god. I don't. It. At least one thing you can agree on is that it's a terrible adaptation. It is terrible. Terrible. My dog's here because he heard me yelling. I'm fine, thank you. Just ranting about a shitty movie. Do not watch Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. Just read the books. Read the books. They're long, but you'll love it. Especially if you love Harry Potter. Read the books. That's all I gotta say.